Hello, and welcome to the Transatlantic Connection Show, bringing you the artisan music and musicians, vagabonds and adventurers, building with the raw ingredients of folk music from both sides of the Atlantic. I am Chris the Bish Lydon, and this week our vagabonds are Americana folk duo Mark Mandeville and Raianne Richards from Massachusetts, USA. They share with us a song from their new album, Road May Rise. On the scene this week, Kev Moore chats to Stuart Jones of Woodworm Studios, home to decades of artisan music, and joins Steve Bonham from our house band, talking about combining his musical life with his other lives in his new book. This is the Transatlantic Connection Show. First up, I'm going to hand over to Steve Bonham, who introduces our Vagabonds of the Week. Over to Steve.
Earlier in this series, we interviewed and heard some great music from our friend Rob Mchale over in North Carolina. Now, Rob's not just a great musician and a lovely human being, he's also a bit of a godfather to a number of musicians, not just a little old me and my helping me tour and play in America, but also to others. And in particular, one of the acts that he was really keen and talked a lot about was Mark Mandeville and Raianne Richards, who've been staying with him on their annual tours for over 9 years. So given his enthusiasm, we thought we'd make contact and see what they've got to say and what they sound like. And boy, they are really, really good. One of my first questions was, how has their music evolved over the last few years?
I think in that time, our writing has gone from being really sort of ambiguously written and enigmatic, sort of based on feelings and based on themes, and slowly it's sort of, we're starting to write more about things with a pointed purpose. I think our new album that came out this year called Road May Rise has two instances where, you know, Raianne and I were asked to write songs for a particular reason. And then, you know, as songwriters, we sort of delve into that. You know, we have a lot of friends who do that. As a matter of fact, you know, they write sort of, what do you call it? Topical songs, you know, things about stuff. And I've always been sort of, as a writer, more interested in writing from a perspective that might last, meaning not including too many things that may become dated. You know, try to writing it in a way where the feeling and the sentiment might persevere longer than mentioning like a town name or a state name in the song, or writing about something so particular that it might not even be relevant the next year.
I mean, you've got a really interesting instrumentation. Raianne, are you the multi-instrumentalist?
Yeah, both of us are multi-instrumentalists, but in our duo, I really am the one who kind of wears all the hats. Like, I play penny whistle, I play clarinet, I play electric bass, I play ukulele, I play a little bit of guitar. We both sing, and as Mark said, we both are writers. So, you know, the role of like kind of who is singing lead may change from song to song. Mm-hmm. And then Mark also in our group plays harmonica, guitar, and mandolin. But he's also a really good banjo player and an excellent bass player. And so we're like, it's sort of like each song, you know, what sounds good for this song. And when we're starting to work out music, you know, for something new, we might kind of just lay everything out and try out different things until we find like the right, what speaks to us and what kind of sounds the best for that particular song. And then over the years, sometimes it'll change. Like, you know, if you do a lot of live performing, you want to keep things fresh, especially for yourself. Like, I think like Bob Dylan was very guilty of this, right? Like he just would get bored, so he'd start singing his songs like with totally different feels and things like that. We're not to that extreme, but I sort of understand, you know, why he would do that, because it needs to be fresh for you as well as your audience. And sometimes just changing and doing a different instrument on that song than what you've done for the last few years can make a big difference.
I do love the different textures you managed to conjure up, and I can guess you can refresh it that way. I mean, to ask you a terrible question, if I ask you the what do you sound like sort of question, what might they expect? Without putting yourself in a label or a box, if you like this, you might like us.
Yeah, I mean, last night we had a friend over and we were listening to an early James Taylor album, one that has like Sweet Baby James and Fire and Rain on it. And you listen to some of those, and these are songs that, you know, when I was learning how to play guitar, I was sort of steeped in Bob Dylan and Neil Young and Cat Stevens. And as for the writing, maybe not so much similarities, but the arrangements is what sticks out to me, because on that James Taylor album, the Sweet Baby James song is guitar and electric bass. And that's, I think it's songs like that that make me want to always use electric bass in our songs. We never have a drummer for the most part. We've steered away from percussion. But we do. We have a lot of texture in our music, and then we also play with a pedal steel player who also plays dobro. We have piano and upright bass and strings oftentimes, and then all of the woodwind sounds that Raianne can supply with the clarinet. And so you're thinking of like bands like Kate Wolf's band, the band that plays with Neil Young, Joni Mitchell when she had a band. You have a lot of singer-songwriters who had bands, and sometimes those aren't the most in the really, I don't want to use a term that might sound negative, but the really staunch, you know, folk fans that just want you to have like the dude or the girl with the acoustic guitar, and that's all they have. Yeah. That's not us. Like even there's this song about moving water from someplace. I can never remember the title of it, but it was an early recording by the Weavers, where they had the London Symphony Orchestra, I think, in the background of the song. But for some reason, the way the mics were placed, the only things you can really hear in the recording are a clarinet and a banjo. And to me, when I hear those sounds, that's really appealing to me.
That's really interesting.
You know, not so much you know, like the new sounds that are being made, which are basically old sounds again. That's sort of, I'm really apprehensive about moving forward with recordings that sound too much like something else. So that's a danger, I guess, is like not wanting to sound like, you know, Motown from that period, or sound like soul music, or sound like folk singers from the 70s, or the country performers. It almost seems too easy to just, you know, let's treat the song, I mean, in an audio studio setting, let's treat it like that.
When you write, do you write together, or do you write a song each?
So lyrically, it's usually he's written the lyrics or I've written the lyrics. We don't really normally collaborate on the lyrical content, but the music is always composed together. One of us may have kind of bare bones of a song, like just the chord progression or something, and then, you know, like I'll bring it to Mark or he'll bring it to me, and then we kind of flesh it out and maybe add more parts, like maybe we should put a bridge, or let's do this differently on the chorus, you know, so that the music part of it is very collaborative. Right. But usually the lyrics are just kind of like, we're both basically poets, right? So we're always thinking about things and jotting them down, and, you know, hopefully at some point it comes together. And we also kind of write at different speeds. Like Mark has periods where he's really prolific and he'll write like 10 songs in 10 months. And I might write one in that time. You know, I'm more of like a stone polisher. I got to really think about it for a long time, and then it'll come out. And oftentimes too, for me, it's just kind of like an all at once. Like I get everything together. Where for Mark, sometimes he'll have just a verse for a while and then have to add to it later.
Yeah, and the danger in working with all these textures, or maybe not a danger, but it's like that our studio albums have some stuff on them, and hopefully that stuff, meaning the pedal steel and the piano and all the different sounds, don't take away from the fact that when we tour nationally, it's usually just the two of us. So, you know, we put out an album a couple of years ago from a house concert tour we did in Canada, where it was just, we had a sound engineer come with us and record us playing at a variety of people's homes, and we put that out as an album, and our fans really enjoyed it because it was just her and I. So ultimately, if the song can stand alone as just us playing it, then we feel that that's a really good song. And then it's fun for us to include all those other textures and have a variety of ways we can play it. And I think that also makes our fans pretty happy. It makes us happy, and like what Raianne was saying before about we don't get bored, you know, we stay creatively attached to the process. We're also not afraid of it changing over time. like songs completely doing things differently, which is much to the chagrin of some of the dudes that we play with, because they're in their mid-60s, and when we change something that they've been working on for the last 5 years, it takes a lot for it to sink in that we've made that change. I'll tell you that.
We must hear something. So what would you have for us here?
This is the first song we can play that's off of our new album, Road May Rise. It's one that's getting some airplay around, and it's one that's hit some people kind of well. Like even early on, the very first and last concert that we played before this whole thing went down in January of this year, there was a man who came up to us after we performed and it was the first song we played in the set, and he remembered it through the whole entire set and came up to us and said, that's something that we really need to talk about. And it affected him in such an interesting way, because there's another part of being a songwriter that I'm really particular about, is not telling somebody what the song is about, because it can be, we want it to be what it needs to be for the listener. And that's something like, who are we to tell everybody, this song is about this and is about my life and blah, 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 blah. Why not let it be what it is for them?
Some of these songs they'll have relevance to current events. Even though we wrote it a couple years ago, we could never have seen a global pandemic coming. But it definitely has a little bit more reverence with the current events. And we've had several songs like that over the years where it's we can still play them 10 years later, and it still is wow, whatever theme we're commenting on, it's still happening. It's still, that lesson still needs to be learned.
So this is called There Will Come a Day. There will come a day where we won't have to worry anymore, and I fear that day is coming, and we won't be ready for it. There will come a time when no amount of metal in a man, with no degree level in this land, will keep him steady. And there will come a day, there will be a time, in a place you least expect it, and you never thought you'd find. There will come a day, there will be a time, a graceful frozen moment for no reason and no rhyme. There will come a day, and there will be a time. Well, be that as it may, not for lack of signals or signs, all the ancient meditations, old-time religion or science, man will find a way to build a better palace out of sand, until another casts a shadow down to render dark and different plans. There will come a day, there will be a time, in a place you least expected, and you never thought you'd find. There will come a day, there will be a time, a graceful frozen moment for no reason and no rhyme. There will come a day, there will be a time. There will come a day, you just let the cards lay where they land, a bad beat folded in your hand, you go out empty. And there will come a time where the means won't mean an end, a step towards the start to warmer climes and much brighter days ahead. There will come a day, there will be a time in a place you least expected and you never thought you'd find. There will come a day, there will be a time, a graceful frozen moment for no reason and no rhyme. There will come a day, and there will be a time.
Thanks to Mark and Raianne for joining us this week. There will be part 2 of their chat coming in a future episode very soon. I am super looking forward to hearing more from them. This week on the scene, Kev Moore welcomes our longtime collaborator and colleague, Stuart Jones, who runs Woodworm Studios in Banbury. I first heard about Woodworm Studios as this legendary place 20 years ago, and Steve often said to me back then, it would be amazing to head back there one day to record. And now we're lucky enough that it's our go-to recording studio. There's such a great vibe there, and Stuart is an all-round wizard. I mean, this place is just steeped in history. Being most famously associated with Fairport Convention, the studio was founded by Fairport bass player Dave Pegg, and still sees a steady stream of folk artists wanting to, come home to roost, if you like. But then the likes of us in the Americana country world, but also rock and metal bands, pop, even modern stuff involving synths and electronics. Kev took a few minutes to speak to Stuart about where things are with the music industry right now in Stuart's eyes. Over to Kev.
This is Kev Moore from The Long Road, and I'm delighted to welcome to the Transatlantic Connection Show our friend and colleague, Mr. Stuart Jones from Woodworm Studios in leafy Oxfordshire. So good to see you, Stuart, and welcome to the show. Do you see any trends in music from the point of view of a studio manager? Do you see styles changing as people come to you for sessions?
Well, everything seems to be getting a bit retro. I'm sort of getting a lot of 80s sounding bands.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
the whole synth thing and the pop sort of drum sound and stuff like that. The mainstay is sort of like, Americana and folk, and sort of I've just done a couple of the country albums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sort of like traditional country. And they seem to be sort of holding their own, whereas a lot of music seems to be sort of like, like the I suppose the more modern rock and metal sound and stuff like that, the very sort of like polished American sound that seems to be, it comes and goes and stuff like that. But the sort of
there is a constant to that. As we call it, the artisan sort of thing. It's that kind of raw and real stuff. It never kind of loses its popularity. Not to say that it's massively popular, but it's got a solid base that doesn't really go away.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about Fairport, for example. They've been going on for
50
years or something. Property's always got people there, and they can do 2 or 3 tours a year, and every year. As an example, there is always that base. You've got to try and sort of capitalize on your fan base,
of course, and
don't try and recreate yourself as something else just for trying to get the fans.
Keep a level of authenticity.
Absolutely.
I think it's like a kickback against too much technology nowadays somehow. This project that we do, we try and keep it as real as we can.
Well, if you listen to what's remained popular through the decades, from sort of like the 50s and 60s and stuff like that, it's all very sort of, I suppose, for want of a better word, traditional sort of sounding music. But you listen to sort of like, I don't know, Pink Floyd and the Beatles and all these sort of bands who are sort of the classics, and they transcend all the fashions.
They endure, don't they? They just endure.
Their sound never gets tired. Whereas a lot of the modern stuff, give it a couple of sort of weeks, months. It just sounds tired.
Some things just have a, like Steely Dan, you know, it's just good, and it's always good.
Yes.
It doesn't sound old, it just sounds like the Dan, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe how you can avoid that categorization of being stuck in an era. I mean, I suppose you can if you know, if you had the syndromes. You thought, I'm not going to use the syndrome because it'll be out of fashion next year, you know.
Yes.
But I suppose that's one way of avoiding it. But other than that, I suppose it's just the music that is intrinsically real, you know, the real instruments that never they always sound like real instruments, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think songwriting nowadays is so production or overproduction. It's good in terms of marketing it for that moment.
Yeah.
But the problem is, because a lot of them are overproduced, that the song is written for the production almost.
Yes.
As opposed to
production isn't serving the song, is it now?
Yes, exactly. And it's a band playing, whether it be something very sort of downbeat or upbeat or whatever, the instrumentation was there just to serve the song, not the other way around. And I think that sort of has an awful lot to do with it.
In conclusion, how do you see things, hopefully, for next year for Woodworm? Do you see, assuming everything gets back to some degree of normality?
I do have potential stuff coming in December. So there is work out there. And I think if they can bring out some sort of testing for, coronavirus, which is instant, which is what they're trying to roll out now.
Yes.
So you can literally just sort of take it in the morning, I'm clear, and go out and do your thing for the day. Yeah. And if they do get a vaccine going, because I know they're talking about, obviously, it just won't be one vaccine, it would be a multitude. So
do you see the business model changing vis-a-vis venues, bands, recording? I mean, I already see that it's changing it in some respects. Some of the bigger venues, won't be able to function. And maybe it's the cottage industry, sort of small pubs with stage in the corner, might be the ones that end up flourishing.
I think, the bigger festivals and the larger venues, they're always going to be on the verge of make or break.
Yes.
I can't see how a festival or large venues can survive without, large capacity crowds or ridiculous ticket prices. I mean, that's the option, really.
Yeah.
And again, going to a gig, it's all about that sort of, being in amongst
that's the experience, isn't it?
Exactly.
You take that away, you're taking away the lure of it, really, aren't you?
Yes. They've trialed so many things and they just don't seem to work, or they don't have, they carry forward. Ultimately, they're going to have to sort of, as long as they can do something with either with the testing, so you can get an instant test.
Yeah.
Literally, so you can go to the door and get tested and walk straight in. But as for the business model, I mean, for me, I'm going to see even more independence, like yourselves.
Yeah.
With no sort of record or management support, because obviously they can't generate the income to be able to pay them back ultimately.
Exactly.
I mean, it does, in a perverse way, as you say, it kind of takes out the middleman. So if they're self-financed and if they have a big enough fan base and stuff like that, they're able to sort of shift those numbers of merchandise and stuff like that. Yes.
With an optimistic sort of lens, I can see some good coming from some of this. It might streamline some things and lead to a lot of inventiveness on the parts of acts, which you have to now be very inventive and think on your feet and come up with new ideas. So there will be some benefits from this. Hopefully people other than Jeff Bezos will benefit from this.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we'll end on that, Stu. But thanks so much for giving us your time.
Thanks, Kev. It's been awesome.
Sweet. Thanks very much, mate.
Awesome. Cheers.
This week from the house band, Steve Bonham takes us behind the scenes in his life and tells us about how he has combined his life as a musician with his other professional lives over the years and managed to gather his thoughts into a new book, a practical guide, not merely a how-to, written over lockdown and was released a few weeks ago. So I'm going to hand over to Steve.
Do you know, when my grandchildren ask me, "Oh man, what did you do during lockdown?" I wrote a book. In fact, I wrote this book. It's called How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World, which, if nothing else, is an extremely timely title. I love writing this book. It's the first time in my life I managed to weave together all the aspects of a somewhat discontinuous and diverse existence. One bit of my life is as a musician, and another bit of my life is as an inveterate traveller, and indeed maybe even an adventurer, and the third bit of my life is as a psychologist, working all over the world with companies and individuals, and sometimes that's been one of the great bases of my travel. But for a long time, and it's been a source of frustration for me, it felt you had to keep those things in separate categories. And well, maybe it's me or maybe it's just the world, but it feels now that everything kind of fits together. The things I learnt as a musician, oh boy, they help my psychology, as does all the travels and all the people and places I've been. I like to think of myself as a psychologist, as someone who's got a very practical experience of lots of different sorts of people rather than a narrow academic base. And as a adventurer, well, all those years as a psychologist have flown me to some great places to set out from. So it was great to write this book, How to Survive and Thrive in an Impossible World. But what is this book about? Well, it's an invitation to liberate yourself. It's an invitation to get yourself into a better relationship with a world that is clearly nuts, and probably for many people dealing with a nuts world at the moment, they feel off balance and unsure and uncertain, and with some reasons. So this invitation to get a grip on yourself and feel stronger. A relationship in the world is possible in which you feel much more authentic, much more about being who you are, much more capable, feel more stronger, able to respond to what's happening. One in which you feel much more in touch with what's going on, and one finally in which you just get up in the morning feeling more inspired. And How to Survive and Thrive is the combination of everything I've learned as a psychologist, as a musician, as an adventurer, as a performer, all pulled together. And so, why might it be useful for a musician? Why might it be useful for an artist? We see, one of the things I think I've spotted over the years, which is the terrible lie of setting a goal for yourself and pursuing it. Every self-help book seems to focus on, first of all, create your goals and then go for it like mad and measure yourself all the way until you realise it doesn't work. And that's not your fault. Goals depend on so much more than you can control. Goals depend on other people, they depend upon resources, they depend on elections, they depend on circumstances way beyond your control. So setting goals for yourself and just blindly shooting after them ain't going to do. And not only that, another problem with goals is that you are so focused on this thing that you don't notice the possibilities around you to achieve so much more if you could pay attention to them and respond to them. So How to Survive and Thrive seems a great manual for the reality of being in a creative space, as well as for anybody else in terms of dealing with this strange place we call life. How to Survive and Thrive says, try and be more open to the world. Try and be more ready for things. Try and experiment with all the rich possibility and magic of yourself, and try and find the companions who can take this great journey with you and help you. If you like the book, you can find it on my website or on the big G's Amazon, but I much prefer you came to my website. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Transatlantic Connection Show. Thank you for watching wherever in the world you are. Remember, please subscribe to the channel, like this video if you liked it, and share it with a pal who you think might like it too. The next episode will be out on Tuesday, the 24th of November 2020. If you enjoyed this show, you might enjoy our podcast too. It's called The Vagabond Way Podcast and is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. Just search for The Vagabond Way Podcast and you will find us. Don't forget, we're on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Stuart Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your ongoing support. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, you, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of things that we make. So, become a vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon, to help us create music, live performances, books and short stories, this YouTube show, our weekly podcast, and some new things we're cooking up. As a vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive live stream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. So, until next time, keep making those transatlantic connections. Bye for now.